And it's rare that the Department of Justice ends up building you like a marketing material saying that, they view you as a threat to one of the most stable and largest networks in the world.
Jason, you're actually the first person I've ever met who's been interviewed by the DOJ. Take me through that. This interview can't be nearly as hard, right?
I'd rather not take you through it. I think we might need a beer if we're going to walk through that. Let's see.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to the Run the Numbers podcast. Today's guest is Jason Pate, the Chief Strategy Officer at Plaid. And in 2020, this guy was right in the middle of Visa's failed attempt to buy the company. He's taking us through that saga in detail, what it was like negotiating a $5 billion deal during COVID, what happened when the DOJ stepped in, and how Plaid came out the other side stronger. Jason's been at Plaid through some massive shifts, from a bank linking infrastructure business to now a full-on network powering some of the largest names in FinTech. We'll talk about what changes when you've got data at scale, how to decide between scaling infrastructure and investing in the network, and why some friction in payments is actually a feature. We also go deep on running an employee secondary, how Plaid approached it, what it solved for the team, and where Jason thinks the secondary market is headed as companies stay private longer. Plus, his take on durable fintech revenue, why, if it ain't broken, maybe you should fix it, and yes, the Roger Federer stat that explains how to build great teams. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Well, if you've listened to this podcast before, you definitely know that I think it's cool to be a fan of business. I'm obsessed with researching how the best companies operate and specifically how they manage their money. And I've learned that a company's financial stack can make the difference between world domination and obscurity. That's why I want to tell you about Brex, because I want you to rule the world. Brex is an impressive financial services and software company that has grown immensely since it was founded in 2017. In just the last year alone, Brex accelerated customer acquisition by 50%, with 91% growth in enterprise customers. And there's good reason that over 30,000 companies from startups to enterprises have flocked to Brex. Brex offers the world's smartest corporate card on a full-stack global platform that is everything CFOs need to manage their finances on an elite level. Plus, they offer modern banking and treasury, as well as intuitive expenses and accounting automation, bill pay, and travel. Wow, it's all in the roster whenever you need it. Brex grows with you. CFOs tell me all the time that Brex makes it easy to control spend before it happens, automate annoying tasks, and optimize their finances. Because listen, at the end of the day, Brex helps them make every dollar count. So if you're a fan of smart businesses too, check out Brex at brex.com/metrics. That's brex.com/metrics. So if you listen to this podcast, you'll know that I am incredibly passionate about the FP&A space because that's the route I went to get to CFO. And I want to tell you about a tool that has exploded over the past few years. It's called Aleph. And I remember getting outbounded by them about 2.5 years ago, and I actually took the bait because they claimed to be able to do a demo with my live data, with me right there on the call. And so I had to see it to believe it. And it was the founder running demos back then. Shout out Albert, hope you're listening. And he connected my NetSuite and built my P&L using their Excel add-in in like 15 minutes. And I was really impressed. Since then, Aleph has gone on to raise money from some of the top VCs out there, and they've built an impressive roster of customers. Many of their customers have been on the podcast, like the CFO at Turo, 8 Sleep, and Zapier. They're all really big champions and supporters of Aleph like me. But it's not just an Excel add-in. Aleph also allows finance teams to work with their live cross-system data using Google Sheets and their web app. And that's cool because it gives teams the option to support a wide range of needs and workflows like budgeting, forecasting, and variance analysis. And speaking of variance analysis, they're doing some really cool things with AI-powered variance analysis. It basically allows you to figure out what's going on and why, and it takes the time that you'd usually spend from hours to minutes. It's really cool. So I highly recommend checking them out and taking them up on that demo or trial, just like I did back in the day. And you can learn more and get started at getaleph.com/run. That is getaleph.com, aleph.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you. All right, I got to get up on my soapbox for a sec here. Everybody's talking about AI-powered this and automated that. But here's the thing about revenue recognition. It's not just about moving data around. It's about getting it right, full stop. So RightRev is laser focused on one thing, RevRec that auditors actually trust. See, there's a difference between automating revenue processes and automating revenue recognition correctly. RightRev was actually built by the godfather of RevRec, who understands ASC 606 compliance, audit controls, data validation, and the flexibility needed for complex B2B contracts. We're not trying to be your billing system or your ERP. We're the revenue recognition engine that sits between your contracts and your financials, making sure every dollar is recognized correctly, on time, every time. Companies like Snowflake and Logic Monitor don't just need fast revenue reporting, they need revenue reporting that's audit ready from day one. And that's honestly where RightRev shines. And what I love about RightRev is they're not out there trying to be everything to everyone and just slap some, AI slop on top of it. While everyone is building these massive platforms that do everything in a kind of mediocre fashion, RightRev does one thing exceptionally well. They make sure your revenue recognition is bulletproof. Ready to stop gambling with your RevRec? Visit rightrev.com to see how we make complex revenue simple. That's rightrev.com, where revenue recognition actually works. Jason, welcome to the Run the Numbers podcast.
Hey, CJ, thanks for having me, man.
So, important question up front. You went to Duke. Have you seen the 30 for 30 documentary, I Hate Christian Laettner?
I think everyone asked me that question, actually, believe it or not. It seems
Really?
like, well, Duke is interesting in it's the number one most hated, number two most loved school in the country.
Wow.
Which just kind of gets to the whole idea of the more you need to build a community around yourself, the more love's going to be existing inside that community. But yes, I've seen it. I wasn't at the school at the time, but no comment on Christian Laettner specifically.
It was one of the most amazing documentaries I think I've seen. And I didn't realize how great of a college player he was. I knew he was an okay NBA player, but the time that squad went on a roll, that was some unmatched basketball that was played.
Yeah, it's been rare to find a team that played that much as a team. You've had a lot of one and done teams and players in the last 10, 15 years.
Right.
But that team was particularly special. I think this last year's Duke team felt like it had a little bit of that. The ending was a little more disappointing, but it's pretty special to see selfless basketball on the court. And I think that was a team that played like a team, which is pretty amazing.
The whole Duke thing, it's I hate it, but I also want to be a part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like I said, number one most loved, number two most hated. They're very close to each other on the emotional scale. There's an opposite end. So, and since you kicked off the podcast with this, I think half of your viewers probably just turned this off immediately and are no longer wanting to listen to anything else I have to say, probably.
Yeah, the Tar Heel fans just ejected. But
exactly.
All right, well, on that note, I want to ask you about Plaid. We've got a lot to dig into here, but maybe you can just start with your current role there and the other roles you've been in, because you've done a lot at a company that's been in hypergrowth for, I think you've been there 8 years.
Yeah, I've been there about 8 years. I'm sure as a lot of your listeners can relate to, when you join a high growth company early on, you end up wearing a lot of hats. And it's part of the fun and the opportunity of joining a company like that. So currently I serve as our chief strategy officer. I've served as our CFO. But honestly, looking back at all the different roles and functions that I've been able to be a part of and build, I think I give a lot of credit to probably the first role I took when I joined the company for helping my professional development and a lot of the impact I ended up having, which was actually joined the company originally in the product org, really focused on new product development.
You were hired as a product person?
I was, yeah.
Wow.
No product background, but the opportunity to jump in. That's such a unique role. And I don't think a lot of people from financial backgrounds look at that role as being a part of a potential career trajectory into finance leadership. But it's incredible because you join the company and the first couple of months, you spend a lot of time. I spent tons of time on sales calls, listening to customers, a lot of time with customers outside of the sales context, just trying to learn what are the biggest problems they're facing in financial services, spending time with consumers to understand what's causing them stress in the financial ecosystem. You just rarely do you get a chance when you join a company to be able to understand the whole context of the business versus jumping right into the first problem that you're trying to solve. And so I was really grateful to have a little bit of time when I joined just to take a step back, listen to customers, listen to consumers, hear the biggest pain points. And I think the second reason it's such an interesting role to take when you think about financial leadership is it forces you not just to think about how to accelerate the current products, which is what you spend a lot of time thinking about, but actually you take a step back and you think constantly evaluating what kind of business you need to be in the future. And so, I think having the chance to do that when I first joined the business for a couple of months changed a little bit of the way that I started thinking about Plaid. And I give a lot of credit to that helping me understand different ways to be more valuable and impactful over the next 8 years.
Being a tool that's used by the finance industry, I guess starting in the product role probably gave you a lot of empathy once you got to the CFO seat. I mean, like in a lot of ways, you are the consumer of your own product, or at least you're in the minds of those people who are using it.
Financial services is really complicated, and the best infrastructure in financial services sometimes falls apart. And so being able to hear from customers firsthand the problems they're facing, what our product was solving, what they were dreaming of in the future, being different about the way they operate the business, there's just no better way to start out the business than going deep on that. I think the second is like get to know your customers' P&L really well is like a really good way to develop a lot of empathy for your customers. You spend a lot of time learning your own P&L and how to build out your own business. But if you can take the time to go learn someone else's P&L, particularly your customers, understand what's causing them stress, what's helping them succeed in their business, it just puts you on a different trajectory as someone who can actually support their growth.
I want to pull on that thread there. What do you mean by getting to know their P&L?
So you'd be surprised how many, I bet if you asked a lot of sales reps, help walk me through the financials of your customer. I don't have stats, but I'd be really curious to know what portion could walk you through that in depth. And when you take a step back, like you're sitting here trying to build your P&L to be the strongest it can to support your customers as best you can. It's really hard to do that if you don't have a deep empathy and understanding of the biggest problems they're trying to solve day to day. And product management, just as a practice, I think teaches you a lot of that. Like you take a step back, you sit and you ask a lot of questions, you listen a ton. You're trying to understand what are the biggest pain points they're facing. And that's a lot on the product side, but at the end of the day, they're all trying to build a business too. And so what are the biggest opportunities? What's going to make them successful in the long run? What moves their P&L? What are the biggest metrics for them? If you can't really answer those questions, it's really hard to build a great product. It's really hard in the finance leadership seat to understand what you should be doing with your business and packaging and pricing to be able to support your customers. So just taking a step back, it just becomes really important to me to understand your customers' P&L if you want to support them really well.
That's such a powerful comment. I bet less than 50% of sales reps know approximately what their potential customer or current customer's growth rate was last year, or if they were profitable or not. But like that, it sounds simple, but that's a huge data point to how you can help them by whatever you sell.
Totally. And what they were trying to accomplish that year. And if that number was a hit or a miss, and if they're feeling like they're playing from behind and need to catch up, or if they feel like they're doing really well and trying to focus on the next thing. So I think all that context is really important if you're going to try and build any durable, great business, period. Jason,
you've helped Plaid evolve from a banking linking infrastructure, which I'm guessing a lot of listeners are pretty familiar with and have used themselves. I think a large portion of America has used it at some point or another, to now a networking business. How are those two business models different? Is like one actually the extension of the other, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think infrastructure businesses, network businesses, these words get thrown out a lot, but it's almost important to take a step back. Like, what are they? Like, what is an infrastructure business versus a network business? The way I think about it is like an infrastructure business could be like a toll road. So like what investors love about these businesses is, they're durable, they're predictable, they're essential. Like if you want to go somewhere, you need to drive on that road, regardless of what's going on in the economy at any given point in time. Cars need to drive across that road. I think what investors worry about with infrastructure businesses is usually the TAM and the commoditization risk of those businesses. So how many people today are really going to drive across that road at scale? Like when do we kind of hit capacity? Or how differentiated is that road versus another road you could take to maybe get to a similar destination? And what does that mean for pricing in the long run? And so I think one of the core reasons investors have these concerns is kind of at its core, a road isn't more valuable because more people drive on it. And so the more people that drive on this road, it's not making it any more valuable for others. And so like a network business, on the other hand, is much more like, maybe it's like the city that you build around the road. And when you start, these are really messy businesses. Like maybe a McDonald's pops up. Maybe someone goes to it, maybe no one goes to it. Maybe then you have a gas station pop up. But over enough time, if you have enough people starting to live and work and transact in that city, it becomes extremely valuable. And that's what investors love about these businesses is the TAM and the upside is massive. The defensibility is really high because they're very hard to build. And they're also really hard to replace. And so usually means they have strong unit economics. It means that they usually are like a winner take most type of a market. And investors love that. What investors don't like about networks is they're notoriously difficult to build. And they usually have a cold start problem. Like in the early days, they can be really fragile and really volatile because there's a chicken and the egg problem when you're trying to get them built up and launched. And so like if you can build a road and build a city around the road, that's when things get really interesting. And that's what we tried to set out to do at Plaid over the last several years.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. This episode of Run the Numbers is brought to you by Navan, the all-in-one travel and expense solution. CFOs and finance leaders, let's be honest here. Your T&E process is broken. Manual reconciliations waste valuable time, policy violations drain money, and limited visibility creates unnecessary risk. Nobody likes that. Navan cuts through these problems, giving finance teams the clarity and control needed to close with confidence, faster and with fewer headaches. Connect your existing eligible Visa, MasterCard, or American Express cards directly to Navan and keep all your card rewards and banking relationships. Get real-time expense tracking, automated policy enforcement, and AI-powered reconciliation that works. Companies like Anthropic, Unilever, and Zoom trust Navan to manage travel spend smarter and increase compliance. Are you ready to modernize your T&E process? Visit navan.com/runthenumbers for your demo today. That's navan.com/runthenumbers. Tell them CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Morgan Stanley recently said NetSuite is under the threat of disruption. That's right. NetSuite, the you never get fired for buying it software. So what's the threat? The answer, Rillet. Rillet is the AI native ERP modern finance teams are switching to because it's faster, simpler, and 100% built for how teams operate today. It doesn't take 12 months to implement. It doesn't feel like filing taxes to use, and your accounting team will actually love it. PostScript closes the books in only 3 days. Windsurf, bet you heard of them. They run finance with just 2 people. And Rillet is backed by Sequoia Capital. Yes, that's Sequoia. Unicorns like PostScript and Windsurf and hundreds of other companies have made the switch, and they're closing books in record time. If I were running a finance team today, I wouldn't default to legacy. I'd look at what's coming next, and Rillet is here. You don't want to be that guy at cocktail parties complaining about how bad his ERP is. Wait, am I the only guy who talks about ERPs around a keg? See how fast your team can move. Book a demo at rillet.com/metrics. That's RILLET.com/metrics. RILLET.com/metrics. As a CFO, you're expected to bring clarity to everything, including how your company manages ownership. The tools you use should make that easier, not harder. But when they come with hidden fees, data you can't always trust, and support you can't rely on, you end up with more frustration than clarity. That's where Pulley comes in. Pulley is the cap table management platform built for finance leaders who need accurate, decision-ready data from a system that works for your business, not against it. With Pulley, you get intuitive workflows, audit-ready reporting, and support you can count on, all backed by predictable pricing you can plan around, so you can stay compliant and make smarter decisions about your company's future. Manage everything from fundraise modeling to ASC 718 reporting to custom liquidity programs, all on one trusted platform. Hundreds of high-growth companies like Linear, Fathom, and Runway trust Pulley to help turn ownership into a strategic advantage, and joining them is now easier than ever. You can switch to Pulley in as little as 5 days, and for a limited time, they're offering 25% off your first year. To claim your exclusive offer, visit pulley.com/mostlymetrics. That is pulley.com/mostlymetrics. Pulley.com/mostlymetrics. And what's beautiful about the business model that you built is you can kind of bring the users to the party. So it's kind of like hacking the cold start problem. Like we already went through the pains of aggregating all of the users over here for this product. It makes our TAM more easily accessible because like we can point them in that direction. Like if you were coming at it and trying to do it in the opposite fashion, I think it would be really hard.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. You build a city with no road getting you there. It doesn't really work out terribly well. And it's exactly where we started with the business, which is, 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, we started by building this plumbing, this infrastructure for financial services. Like we wanted to help you connect your bank account. If you have a finance folder on your phone, you probably have used this a number of times now, but if you want to be able to connect all the different applications to your financial life, whether that's at a traditional FinTech, a bank, or increasingly these applications that you never would put in the finance folder of your phone, like Comcast, for example, like you're going to need to use Plaid to help make that connection. And for years, this was our core business. Like we created a really nice way for consumers to be and businesses to share their information. And every day, more companies became customers, which brought more consumers along, and we were able to help them share their information. And our data network began to grow. To give you a sense of the scale of the data network, I think when I joined Plaid 8 years ago, it was maybe like 1 in 100 consumers were connected through Plaid in America, which at the time felt like a really large number to me. I think you fast forward to today, and more than 1 in 2 Americans have connected through Plaid. And so it's just like an incredible, data network and ecosystem. And that's when we started to really invest a lot more into these kind of network-oriented products.
Was there a moment where you're like, this data allows us to do so much more? Or was that kind of the vision from the start?
Yeah. Zach talked about this when I was recruiting to join Plaid. So like this is, I think, been a big part of Zach's vision for a long time, but it's hard because again, you need, if you're going to go build this city, you need there to be enough traffic coming through for there to be a reason to have the city. And so it's really hard to figure out when and how to do it. And also, not every business is meant to be a network business. I see a lot of companies, you're like, we have so much data scale, let's go become a great network business. You're like, data is very company specific. I see a lot of companies trying to chase data for data's sake, and not all data is created equal and not all data is valuable. I think for Plaid, data allows us to do a lot more. Like specifically, it's nice to say that we've gone from 1 in 100 connected users to maybe more than 1 in 2, but like, great, that's a nice vanity metric. Why does that matter? What does it actually do for our customers? What does it actually do for our business? I think there's 2 big things it does for us. One is for our core business. It improves conversion. It makes it much stronger. So imagine you connect to Venmo the very first time. There's a little bit of friction in that onboarding experience. Not a lot. We try to make it really good, but there's still some friction in selecting your bank and connecting your account and making sure you're managing the permissions. Now, the next time you come in, maybe 2 weeks later, and you want to connect to Comcast or Robinhood or another application, we can make that really magical. That can be as simple as a Face ID or an OTP to your phone. And that means much higher conversion, which is what our customers care a lot about, right? They spend all this money to get a user all the way to their front door, and they want it to work really well for them. And so, when we thought about the network and when to start investing more in the network, this is a big piece of it. When are we going to see more and more returning users, right? Because for our core business, seeing returning users is how we can offer a really differentiated experience. So today it's, more than 60% of our users, of our sessions at Plaid are people we've already met before, people who've come in. You've downloaded an application, you're downloading your 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 10th. And for those users, we're typically able to offer up to a 30% higher conversion than we would have the first time we met them. Now that's incredible for our customers. So if you're Robinhood, not only can we help you convert to 30% more users, but you value that at the lifetime value, the sum of all the lifetime value of all those users. It creates a ton of value for our customers. Put differently, it makes the city more valuable for everyone. Like having more consumers in this ecosystem makes it more valuable for every one of our customers. Whereas 10 years ago, we just wouldn't have been able to do that.
Someone once said to me, data is valuable if it ends up in a financial model somewhere. And you were just kind of alluding to that. Like if you can substantiate a higher lifetime value because of that, the conversion rate's going up. Like that's the power behind it.
Exactly. It's like businesses are using Plaid because it helps them build a closer relationship with their customer faster, right? And it allows them to better serve their customers faster. And so if we can help convert more users, that is really valuable to our customers. Again, like I think the second reason the data network's valuable is like, yes, it powers our core business, but also lets us build new products in the future. So if I told you now had access to the largest, financial network in America, what are the biggest problems you want to solve? And you go back and you sit down with customers and you sit down with consumers and ask them about the biggest stresses and pain points in their life, you're going to come up with a pretty interesting list of problems that you can solve. And the ones that we've really focused on at Plaid have been credit. So about half of Americans are thin filed or have no credit file history. And there's a lot we can do to support them getting access to credit. 2 is fraud. Fraud is a going concern. You don't even have to talk to just financial services companies. Talk to any Fortune 500 company, and they're going to be somewhere on their top priority list talking about the problems they're facing in fraud and payments today. And it's a multi-billion-dollar problem that is scaling non-linearly. So with every dollar of payment, you're actually seeing a higher and higher proportion of that payment volume becoming fraudulent. AI is an accelerator of that fraud. To solve fraud, you have to be able to see fraud. And when we can help connect more than 1 in 2 Americans, we have a pretty good visibility of what's happening in the ecosystem. And there's some unique ways we can help solve that fraud. And the third is payments, finding faster, more effective, safer, lower cost ways for people to be able to move money. Again, none of those were things we could have done if we hadn't built this plumbing that helped you at first be a data bank linking company. And over time, that bank linking company gave us the ability to build out these new network products that we otherwise, never would have been able to build. I think it was like 5 years ago, we had 0% of our ARR came from new products. You fast forward to today, and it's well over 20% of our total ARR, and it's growing more than 100% year on year. And so this is a big change for the business, but one that's had a pretty significant impact.
Jason, you said the F word, fraud there. So given that payments, it is susceptible to fraud. I had a Nigerian prince today text me and ask me to wire him some money. How much of the friction in payments today is actually a feature, not a bug?
So the question, it might be a feature, but who is it a feature for? Get really deep on the customer centricity here. Yes, the faster money moves, the faster fraud can happen. And so if you slow it down, there's this nice trade-off between speed and risk. So you go to most companies, and the first product suite that got built for them was, hey, we'll help you pick a point on the line. And by that, I mean, you can onboard no one and have no fraud.
Yeah, 100% accurate.
I can guarantee you no fraud if you onboard no users.
Not a great business, though.
Not a durable business. Or you can onboard everyone really quickly and have some percent fraud based on your business model, your onboarding process. Here's your line. Pick a point on it. Okay, it's helpful to have that visibility as a finance leader, but that's not the problem they want to solve. They want you to move the line. I want to onboard more users and have less fraud. How do you help me do that? And so I agree that in payments in particular, there is this trade-off between kind of speed and fraud. But the solutions that we want in the future are not ones that just help us figure out how to make that trade-off. They're actually things that actually improve the quality of the trade-off. They make it so that you can onboard more good users. To do that, you need a couple things. You need a really large identity database of these consumers. You need a network of companies reporting in fraudulent events so that you can identify where there might be fraud. You need tooling and systems to be able to track and identify where the fraud's happening and block the bad users and onboard more good users. And so I definitely agree with you that this is historically has been a feature, not a bug, but the question is, who's it a feature for? I think you talk to most merchants, it's not a feature for them. They want to onboard, their ask is help me onboard more users more quickly and move money faster safely. And to them, it's not a feature. It is still a bug in their system.
So with that context, where do you think the future of payments is going?
Yeah. I'll maybe speak for my own view, which is there's been a lot of focus on checkout.
Yeah, a lot. That's crowded.
Yeah. If you bought anything on the internet in the last 5 or 10 years, you know exactly what we're talking about, which is you get to the end of your flow and there ends up being a checkout screen and there's 10 or 15 buttons. How do you want to pay? Pay with X, pay with Y, pay with Z. There's a huge list and they're all fighting for ownership over the top ranking or the best placement for checkout.
They're all fighting over my burrito on DoorDash. I can even make 5 installment payments if I want, Jason.
Exactly. They're spending all this time fighting over this last stage of the puzzle. That's not where I think the world heads. I think we're going to fight a lot less over checkout and there should be a lot more fighting over check-in. And by that, I mean, again, go back to the customer. The customer doesn't want to think of their onboarding flow as 10 funnels, each which has some drop off along the way. You created a login screen and then you selected your basket and then you went in and populated your payment information and then you checked out. They want to bring great users onto the platform and have them be engaged. And so how do you help solve that problem? Well, imagine now instead you're at Etsy or Target.com or Instacart. And the moment you log in, you set up that login, you bring with you as the consumer or business, permission, bring with you all the information. Chipotle knows how much you like to, they say, spend at fast casual restaurants, and they have your payment information ready to go. And maybe they even know that you like to order this food pretty regularly, so they're going to offer you better discounts and coupons along the way. There's a lot of personalization opportunity for you. But importantly, as soon as you log in, you're ready to check out. And so instead of fighting over which 15 buttons are on the checkout screen, we're now spending a lot of time figuring out, how do I make it so easy for you, CJ, like the actual consumer, to log in and get the burrito that you wanted as soon as you want it, instead of having to wait and go through this long process of a lot of drop off. And so when I think of the future of payments, to me, it's a lot more about consumer identity and consumer personalization. It's a lot more about the login and check-in experience and a lot less about the checkout.
Just reflecting on what you were saying, I'm thinking about like the choke points along the way, and the bulk of the time is in that identity phase, right? It's not in hitting just pay from the 10 options there.
Yeah, like you go through the experience, you load your payment information, and then you probably have some step-up authentication and fraud verification. Like, put differently, payments for a long time, the competitive dynamics in payments have been, can I offer you more types of payment? Mm-hmm. Right? I will win you as a merchant, as a payment processor, if I can offer you more payment types, more currencies, more different ways to accept, because it moved acceptance. I think what we're starting to see now is most processors and most payment providers are able to offer most of the payment options that consumers want to pay with. So take that to the extreme. Imagine every payment type is available for every customer exactly as you want it. Well, then what's the bottleneck now? Mm-hmm. Well, it's authenticating, authorizing you, CJ, making your experience really easy. It's not just making sure we have all the different cards in the wallet you want to pay with. It's actually saying, assume we have all the cards in the wallet that you want to pay with. How do I make it easy for you to go and actually buy what you want? And that's where I see the world of payments moving towards, is much more around consumer financial identity and payments identity and business identity. And I think that's where we're going much more to a world of check-in than check-out.
I like that. I want to segue to talk about negotiating. You've had, to say the least, some time in the trenches there, and you've been party to a couple of big ones. So I've heard you say that negotiations are less a game of chess and more a game of Marco Polo. What's that mean?
Yeah, I do think this is an area that a lot of sales and BD and corp dev teams get it wrong. Like they think of negotiating as this game of chess where I'm trying to take as many of your pieces as I can and protect mine as much as I can and misdirect from time to time to try to get leverage and ultimately, try to think 5 moves ahead and win. And that's the way they think of negotiating. Personally, like the most impactful, transformative negotiations I've been a part of have been much more about listening and trying to understand one another's priorities in what can oftentimes feel like this fog of assumptions. You don't really know what the other person is perfectly solving for. You haven't fully expressed what you're trying to solve for. So everyone's just trying to listen and learn to better understand it. Like, what does that actually mean in practice is, compared to a lot of negotiations that I've seen or a lot of approaches I've seen to it, it means asking a lot more questions than you think you need to. I think that's really important. Like, it's about repeating back what you think that you heard the person say. There's so many times someone's like, oh, I understand. And they actually didn't understand what the person was really trying to communicate. It's about being really curious when you're not sure or something isn't adding up and actually asking follow-ups. And when you are speaking, it's about being willing to be really direct, clear, and honest about your own needs. Because look, chess can be played in silence, but Marco Polo is a game played out loud. And if you're just handing these red lines back and forth in silence and hoping to get to a great outcome, I think you're doing it wrong. Like, you got to keep calling out to one another and listening and hearing the responses and trying to find ways to address course to get to the same place at the end of the day. And those are the most transformative negotiations and discussions I've ever been a part of.
Repeating back what you heard, that is like a golden nugget. And I think for 2 reasons. The first is, like, there's nothing more powerful in the human language than someone hearing their own name. And then if you're also reflecting back, like playing back what they said, they're like, oh, you heard me. But I also think, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, like, you have to qualify what they truly meant by it, because they may be saying something, but like from a business perspective, it may actually be adding up to something else.
Totally. This is the getting curious piece that's so important, which is, we all run what we heard through a filter in our own mind.
Yeah.
We organize it. And it's like, I've got it. And either we think we've got it or we don't think we've got it. But most of the time, we don't know if we actually heard it correctly. And it's incredible. I encourage active listening. If you actually just take the time, just be willing to be vulnerable and be like, here's what I thought I heard. Does that add up? Does that make sense? Am I missing something? And you take the time to actually ask that back, you will be shocked how many times you will be met with a clarification, a revision, a reversal of what you actually thought you might have heard, because the person is getting the opportunity to feel heard and actually share back what they want. It's also like you're being vulnerable. You're saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything that you just said. I'm asking if I got this right. Are you willing to meet me? I'm calling Marco. Are you willing to yell Polo back? Like, are we willing to meet our way back towards the middle? And I just find it just builds a lot more trust and authenticity. I think where these things usually fall apart is distrust. Parties don't feel like they feel like it's a game of chess. They feel like someone's trying to take from them and beat them and win, versus realize that you actually have some similar goals and there's an opportunity to find those goals together.
Well, chess is also a very binary game. Like, I get a piece, you lose a piece.
Yeah, exactly. And when you realize, like, there are oftentimes things you care deeply about that the other person doesn't care about at all.
That was my next question. Can you say more about that? Like, identifying gives that like aren't actually a give?
Yeah, a big part of it first is you'll never figure this out if you don't ask the question. So most of the time, if it's important to us, we feel it probably must be important to someone else.
Oh, good point.
And so we see a lot of times in negotiations where, like, I can't tell you how important that is to me because I know it's important to you, and then we're going to fight over this dimension. Whereas, like, even when we were talking through the Visa acquisition, there are a number of times we realized there are things that were really important to us that end up not being that material or important to Visa. And so that's a great win. And vice versa. There are things that are very important to them that end up not being that material to us. And so those are great opportunities to realize that we can keep making ground forward because we all have slightly different preferences. And if we're willing to open up and talk about what is important to us, we typically get a lot closer to the bullseye.
Isn't that funny? Like, we have this scarcity complex around negotiations where we're like, if I tell you what I really want, you're going to hold that over my head, or it's going to be further away and unattainable for me. But really, if you do it right, it can actually unlock the door for them to be like, oh, that's what you wanted? Like, yeah, we can totally hook you up with that.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember, like, at the end of these, you're either doing business together in a partnership. If it's a BD deal, they're becoming a customer. You're merging the businesses. This is not the end of the conversation. And so when you treat negotiations like they're this one-time event, I'm going to do this once and then we're never going to talk to each other again, you just fundamentally approach it the wrong way. Like, the reason you all are in this conversation is you want to have a long-term relationship in one way or the other. And when you use all the terms that people typically use, like hold your cards close to the vest, right? Like you're not actually trying to build anything durable together. And you'll both feel that, and you'll, as a result, both end up missing the mark on where you want to land.
Jason, the Visa deal that never was is folklore at this point. Can you take us through that experience? What was going on in the world at that time, and how did it come about?
Yeah, look, I mean, the decision to sell the business was probably the hardest decision we've ever made as a business. And it wasn't immediately obvious. Obviously, Visa has a really exciting opportunity for us to accelerate our mission and vision. If you want financial services access, everywhere, all the time, like, Visa is a great partner to think about expanding your geographic platform or expanding the mission and vision of what you're doing. And I think, to Zach's credit, that was the core of a lot of why he was excited about it. Yes, there was economic reasons that it made sense, but really at its core, it was like, this is a way to potentially accelerate the mission and vision of what we wanted to do. But it wasn't immediately obvious because the business was going really well and we were really excited about where we were headed. Fast forward a year after we signed signed the original paperwork, and a lot of things were fundamentally different. And at that point, it started making a lot of sense to walk away from the transaction. The business has accelerated significantly. During the pandemic, you couldn't go into a bank branch anymore. And so a lot of the things that were happening in financial services were digitizing. You had to do them through a digital experience, which meant you needed digital connectivity, which means you needed this plumbing that Plaid had helped build. Not only was revenue accelerating, but importantly, our data network started growing much faster than we had anticipated. And that meant all of these things we want to do in the future around being able to build these new network products that help solve problems in fraud and in credit, all of a sudden they went from being 5 years away to maybe being 2 or 3 years away. And so you could feel this excitement building inside the team around, like, we're closer than we've ever been to being able to solve the problems we're most excited to be able to solve. Like, the city's coming. Like, we're starting to build this city out in a much more meaningful way. There's more cars than ever going across the freeway interested in this city. And so we're like, maybe the right answer is actually to keep doing what we always intended to do to begin with, which is keep building what we wanted to build. Like, while looking back, it was definitely the right decision for the business. it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through professionally. Like, there's lots of different emotions, lots of different feelings about it within the company and externally. It's a really hard decision to go through. And I think that said, when you talk to the team, they sense the acceleration in the business. They saw the opportunity to go be closer than they've ever been before to building this next chapter, this network business that we've always dreamed of building. And I think that helped alleviate some of the concerns as we were going through it.
It sounds like it was both the right choice to say yes, and then later the right choice to say no.
Yeah, in life, you almost never get the chance to make the same decision twice, right? And if you do, it usually means one of those decisions was the wrong decision.
I know, but it doesn't sound that way. It's an uncommon scenario, definitely, in life and the business world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, deciding to move ahead with the transaction was the right decision at the time. Like, it elevated our brand, it improved awareness, improved access to capital. Like, a lot of good things came from it. And it's rare that the Department of Justice ends up building you like a marketing material saying that, they view you as a threat to one of the most stable and largest networks in the world. But also deciding to step away from it was the right decision for the business, as we realized like we are closer than ever to building the city that we wanted to build going forward. So it was a good thing for the business. It was a really hard thing personally. And for a lot of us at Plaid and for the whole team, wouldn't want to have to live through it a second time. But I think both doing the transaction and stepping away from it were both the right choice for Plaid.
Jason, you're actually the first person I've ever met who's been interviewed by the DOJ. Take me through that. This interview can't be nearly as hard, right?
Yeah, I'd rather not take you through it. I think we might need a beer if we're going to walk through that. Let's see. I usually think of life as having a couple pillars personally, like they give you some stability. And so you think about maybe it's your significant other, your friends, your geography, your family, your work. Like, these are all these different pillars that kind of help keep things stable. And in 2020, a lot of these pillars were feeling a little shaky in my life.
Because we were in the middle of COVID during this, right?
Exactly. So, like, to paint the picture personally, January of 2020, we signed the agreement with Visa.
Okay.
The pandemic hits and we close the office in March, so people go back home. The DOJ case really started picking up in April and May. My son, like our first child, was born May 3rd, 5 weeks after the pandemic started. And we had no childcare, no support in San Francisco where we were at the time. And so I relocated the family to be a little closer to my family to get some support and help in, July. And so all of these things hitting at the same time, like first time parent, going through a transaction. I think my low point during that whole process was, when was it? It was probably, I was on an interview with the DOJ. There were forest fires happening in California and in Seattle, which is where I was. And so like the air quality was bad. I had a 2-month-old, no childcare. And so I had to bring my 2-month-old onto a DOJ interview. And so during this interview, like I'm trying to like hold and care for my child while also like trying to answer questions the DOJ is asking. My kid's screaming. He's losing his mind because that's what 2-month-olds are supposed to do. I think the only silver lining was I ended up not being able to answer all that many questions just because it was so loud during the call. But it was a lot happening all at once. And like, I think you take a step back as leaders, we have to acknowledge when like all of our teams feel this in different ways, different times too. And I think the important takeaway here is like, by the time you're showing up for work on any given day, your team member is showing up for work, there's a whole life happening behind the scenes. I think the best leaders I've ever worked with, and certainly the type of leader I try to be, is one who takes into consideration like, that life does exist before you walk into the four walls, and that it can make you 10 times better, or it can really inhibit your ability to be the best version of yourself. And so it was a hard time. Things have gotten much, much better, but that was a particular low point when you're going through all those things at once.
Dude, I empathize for you. I'm the type of person who goes nuts like if my dog barks during like a board meeting. So I can't imagine like a screaming baby and you're on the phone with the DOJ. That is like, in the moment, that must have been horrible. But just like looking back, that's just like, whoa, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah. Like I said, we should get a beer at some point and talk about it. But it was wild.
That's amazing. Man, what a weird time in the world that was. You're out on the other side of things now. You've made it through, I think, the thick of things when it comes to those types of deals. But I want to talk about the recent fundraise you did because it's exciting stuff. Congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you.
So Other than the killer business momentum, what struck me is the motivation and the structure of the 500 million plus that you raised. Can you speak to what this solved for employees? Because I think it's a pretty unique case study here.
Yeah, the business as we were raising was already really well capitalized and profitable. So we didn't have a real need for capital for operational purposes. But the main reason that we decided to move ahead with a raise was because we wanted to use the capital to deal with expiring RSUs. So we had RSUs that were going to expire in 2026, and we used the capital to convert those RSUs into shares and then use the remainder of the portion to offer like a small tender to the team as well. And so why do we do it? You've seen these rounds become much more common as companies have stayed private much longer, but RSUs have a certain lifespan associated with them. And we decided to actually drop the second trigger and pay the tax liabilities associated with those RSUs. And then we had a little bit left over for some tender and liquidity for the team. But certainly the first capital raise I've done where a couple things are a little bit different about this kind of a raise. One, you need to raise the full amount, right? Like there's other worlds where you raise 95% of your original target because there's a little bit of flexibility in exactly how much you need. In this situation, you need to raise exactly enough to pay the IRS the exact amount.
I never thought of that. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be 95% of the way there. You have to be.
IRS does not accept 95% receipts.
You're like, we were close. Let's just call it a draw. We'll pay not usually how it goes. And the second piece is there's an interesting dynamic where the higher the valuation, the more you need to raise, which is also interesting. And so just from like for your listeners, like a very different dynamic on a raise than you're used to, which may be like, the higher the valuation, you may need to actually raise less capital along the way, or there's not a specific target that you absolutely have to hit. And so it was a little bit different than other raises that I've been a part of in the past. But look, we ended up raising about $575 million against Common at a $6.1 billion valuation, which we were happy with. I think even more importantly, the quality of the investors that we were able to partner with. We were oversubscribed, and we were able to partner with groups like, Franklin Templeton and Fidelity and BlackRock and Millennium. There's some fantastic investors that we're really excited, as well as, seeing continued participation from NEA and Rillet and some of our investors who have been with us for a while. So it was a exciting time. I think also important for the team, and this is what some companies are facing, is you hadn't had a new mark on the business in a long time.
And it was higher than the Visa deal that never was. So congrats.
Thank you. But it's really helpful to be able to go to the team and say, like, here's the equity that we're able to grant at this price. It's the same price that investors came in and purchased the equity from. And it's the same price that we're able to offer you a tender and purchase some of your equity from. It just creates a new kind of floor for where the business is so that we can all continue to grow from here together.
It's fascinating when you do a sale of a company versus like a fundraise of a company, because someone once said to me, CJ, you want to optimize the value of the fundraise, right? You don't want to spend all your time just trying to get the highest value possible and also put yourself in a hole, but you want to maximize the value of the exit because you only get to do that once. Does that strike you as correct? Shades of gray? How does that statement feel to you?
I think it's so company specific on what you're trying to accomplish. Again, our true north with the sale process, we've never tried to build a business to sell it. I think what excited us and why we were interested in having the conversation, and we've gotten inbound over the years multiple times, but the reason we took those conversations quite seriously was, we viewed it as an opportunity to accelerate the mission and vision of the business. It needs to make economic sense for investors. It needs to make economic sense for everyone. But if the mission and vision aren't aligned and aren't there, then a lot of the rest isn't the main priority, at least, maybe speaking for Plaid and how we think about it. We spent too long building this infrastructure, and we now have this really interesting city we built around it, that if we don't get to keep building the thing that we think is really important for the ecosystem, it's really hard to imagine that we'd view that as the right decision for the business. And
you bring up a really good point. The emphasis on building something. Like, we're not playing this game just to raise the money. Like that's an event, a point in time. Can you speak to how you kind of like acquired this rare skill set in this secondary sale? Does that feel like something that like, I don't know, people must be calling you, because I don't know too many people who have done that.
Yeah, it's become a much more active conversation among like finance leaders. I probably do get a call a week from a CEO or CFO of a late stage growth company that's saying like, we're trying to figure out our RSU expiration, or it's been a while since we offered liquidity and now we have RSUs. How do you handle that? Like whatever the question might be, there's all these questions around how do I build an equity program for this new world where companies are staying private longer? It's just a different structure. I'm always happy to take those conversations and talk through it because the analogy I always give is I spent a lot of time when I was going to propose to my wife figuring out, I may have talked to this, like, how do you design and buy a wedding ring? Like that's a skill set you have no idea how to do when you start. Like,
such a good analog to this.
No one's ever taught you that. So you spend all this time trying to get smart about how to do it in a way that's meaningful and personal. And then if you're lucky in life, which so far I've been, like, you never need this skill set again. And so it's this example of like you try to learn all of these things you can so that you can do it one time. And that always feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. And so, with wedding rings, I had friends who were proposing later on. They would just reach out, ask questions like, how'd you buy it? How'd you go through the process? I think the same thing's been true on the secondary and RSU and liquidity and equity side with companies, which is, look, we learned a lot. If we can help save others, time, effort, mistakes along the way so that they can actually build the right outcome, like, that's great for everyone in the ecosystem. Because I think at the end of the day, we just want there to be more great companies building more great products. And if this is going to pause them or get in the way of them doing that, let's find a way to speed it up.
Yeah, before this, like Stripe and Airbnb were the two that came to mind that had this RSU thing that they were trying to thread the needle on. Did those ring a bell?
Yeah, and Canva and Figma, and I mean, there's been a number, and over the next several years, there's a lot more that are going to need to. And so I don't see this going away. I think we're going to need to find better, more reliable structures to be able to handle and support this as an industry, because I don't think this is a one-time thing for the ecosystem.
Couldn't agree more. You are much more of an expert on payments and fintech than I am, but something I do know is that not all fintech revenue is created equal. And so I was excited to have you on the pod today to ask, how do you square up what type of fintech streams are more or less durable? Is there like a hierarchy of which fintech revenue streams are more valuable?
I think of it less of which ones are the most and least valuable. I think it more is, I think fintech's going to need to continue to do what it's been doing, which is diversify. Like, I think in financial services, continued multi-product diversification is going to be really important. Interchange revenue is great, and lending revenue and sources are great. And, checking accounts and interest payments and NIM, like, they can all be great business models individually, but individually they're a little bit more volatile.
Exactly.
And it can be hard with only one tool in the tool belt to be able to reliably support your customers and consumers and grow LTV in the long run. And so I think it's less about which revenue streams are the best and the worst. I think at any given point in time, you could probably find a point in time when one of them was better than the other. But what I do think is true here is you will see companies continue to build more multi-product, more diversification, and support their customers much more holistically. And I think those will be the companies that have I guess in your terms, like the best revenue in fintech.
It sounds like you're alluding to like a layer cake strategy.
Yeah, I think it's really like you need to deeply understand the top 3 or 4 priorities for your customers, like end consumers in this case, or small businesses, which is like brokerage and trading can be great, and crypto can be great. And depending on what kind of application you are and who your consumers are, your consumers might not care about that part of the financial ecosystem. They might care about the checking account and early wage access and other products and services. And so it is a layer cake, but I don't think it'll be one layer cake for all end segments. I think each one of these companies are building a product suite that best supports their consumers' needs. Chime just went public, and I know you did a coverage on that. Like, Chime knows their customer base, and they'll try to expand their customer base over time, but they know their customer base and they know what those consumers want and need, and they're starting with the most important pieces for them, and they'll keep expanding that product suite over time.
Well, something a lot of listeners are probably wrestling with is like, how do I balance the investment in the main thing of what got me here versus like what the next evolutions for growth are? And you've also sat in the CFO seat. You help get this networking business off the ground. How do you prioritize the networking investment versus continuing to scale infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it's a much more a question around when to do it than how to do it. So,
okay.
Like, I'll give you an example from Plaid's world, and I'll maybe try to generalize it a little bit. But we knew we wanted, like, the business needs to be a network business in the long run, right? We knew that it needed to be a network business because having this road is phenomenal. Being able to be the data pipes for consumers to share their information to power the products that make their lives better is great. But if we don't leverage that information to help make consumers' lives better in a way that truly no one else could, then we haven't really lived up to the kind of business that we need to be in the long run. And so the question is, great, well, when do you make the switch? And a big view of mine is, a lot of people say, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? They'll talk about, like, it's fine, leave it alone. I think it's actually exactly when things aren't broken that it might be the best time to take a look at them and look at them really closely. I think we're really good in general as businesses of knowing what to do when things aren't going well. You take 2022 as an example. The markets went from valuing growth at all costs to really shifting to value efficiency, profitability. People had a pretty good sense of what to do. You saw a lot of companies tighten the belt, lower cost structure, draw a higher line on what kind of return they wanted from the areas they're investing in. Where a lot of companies get it wrong is they don't always know what to do when things are going well. So we made that transition from infrastructure to network in 2021, 2022. We started making that transition. Things weren't going poorly then. In fact, like, the business was growing at all-time highs. We were profitable. We expanded into new segments. We had a really strong balance sheet. Like, the business was going about as well as it could have been going. But we knew that a couple of things are important. Like, we knew the kind of business we were going to need to be, which is this network business, which meant we needed at some point replatform the whole business to be able to actually support network products. And that's when we decided to pivot and make the change. Like, a lot of people are like, things are going great. Why would you pivot now? Why would you change the strategy when it's working so well? And it's oftentimes exactly when things are going so well that it can be the best time, because the team felt the momentum and acceleration of the business. They knew we wanted to build this network business in the long run, and it was a great opportunity to go and do that. Now, it wasn't cheap. Like, there's a lot of trade-offs we went through here, which was, it was going to require us to go from cash flow positive to significantly cash flow negative for probably a couple of years as we replatformed the business. At the same time, everyone else was cutting costs, right? Everyone's tightening the belt and spending less. We're actually going to go and spend more, which could be a little bit concerning when you're going through it. And we also knew it wasn't going to produce results in 1 year or 6 months or even 18 months. You knew it would take a couple of years to start to see. So I remember there's some moments in there, you're 18 months into the investment, you spent a lot of money, you still believe absolutely where you're headed. This is the right place to go, but the metrics aren't there yet. Like, you haven't seen them actually get produced. And that's the point in that journey that can feel the most uncomfortable and where it can feel the hardest. Now, fast forward to today, and we exited that investment back to profitable with 3 new product lines, not just products, but 3 whole new product lines in credit, payments, and anti-fraud that are now more than 20% of our ARR, and they're growing 100% year on year. It was clearly the right investment, but that's easy to say now. When you go back 2-3 years and we were, there's a point or two of revenue and we were still slowly growing into it, you weren't 100% certain where it's going to be headed. And so you asked a great question, which is like, when do you make that investment? We could have made it 5 years earlier. We could have made it 5 years later. Why did we make it then? I think for us, we looked at a metric, which was, we knew the biggest part of the network was going to be, do we recognize the users? So imagine, again, going back to this analogy that I've now beaten to death around, like, the road and the city, but a fast pass on a freeway is only useful if drivers are coming back over and over and over and over again. And so we needed to have enough people coming back over the freeway to know that a fast pass is worth building. And so we tracked pretty closely what % of our traffic was people coming back a second time, third time, fourth time, 10th time. And we saw that break through a certain level. We knew it wouldn't be that long before that number was where it is now, like 60, eventually 70, 80. It'll keep growing over time. The reason that was important to us is that's how our customers think about value. If I can improve your conversion massively on 1% of your traffic, you may not care very much. If I can improve your conversion 30% on 60% of your traffic, you care a lot. And so that was our true north metric. I think, to generalize it maybe for the listeners in general, listen and watch your customers. The best way to know when you should make a switch from an infrastructure to a network business is listen to your customers. We started seeing some of our customers building their own effectively recognized user networks in their own ecosystem using Plaid information and data that they had sourced. And so when you start seeing there being a value of network effects for individual customers, then if you were to create a network effect for the entire ecosystem, that there's a ton of value in doing that. And so I think for those that are thinking about making this transition or crossing this chasm from infrastructure to network, talk to your customers, listen to them, like sit down with them, see if any of them are starting to build some of these network products themselves. When you start seeing that happen, you know, when you can go from an individual customer to your whole ecosystem, there's going to be a lot of value there.
I love that. Jason, I want to hit on the people side of things for a second here.
Yeah.
You've no doubt built some great teams in your 8 years or so at Plaid, and the headcount has gone up significantly since then. So you've had to hire a lot of people and ramp a lot of people. What's your philosophy on ramping team members?
Whether they report to the org I work at or whether I'm just spending time with people when they join, I usually say the same thing, which was, I think people oftentimes have a greater ability to impact the business in their first 3 months than they might in their next 3 years. And the reason I say that is we've done something in a certain way for some period of time. Many of those have great reasons. Some of them might not have great reasons. And when you come into a new business, there's a tendency I see from people to say, they've figured it out. I mean, the company I'm joining has figured it out. Just sit quietly, assume you know, or pretend that you know what's going on, and just like follow along because they don't want to rock the boat. And what I tell people is, please do the exact opposite. I actually want you to create a Word doc, and every phrase, term, process, approach, theory, strategy that does not make sense to you or that you don't fully understand, write it down. Just a little bullet. And once a week, when you're onboarding for your first 3 months, find someone, it can be me, it can be anyone in the company who you trust, to sit down and say, I would like to just go through this in a lightning round. And I'd like to ask you about every one of these. I typically find, like, hopefully 95% of the time, we have really good reasons for why we did something. But a couple of the times, they end up finding a significant hole or opportunity that we hadn't identified because they came in with fresh eyes. And so even if they never find anything incrementally valuable, the failure scenario of doing this is they ramp much faster, they learn more global context about the business, and they get more comfortable asking questions and saying, I don't know, which is such a helpful and healthy culture to build inside of the business.
That is sage advice right there. I'm also stealing some of that for ramping new team members.
Go for it.
Jason, we started with Christian Laettner at the top of the pod. We're getting towards the end of the pod. You'd hit me with a Roger Federer stat. Can you go over that for us?
Yeah, we have a concept of like be a part of a championship team. And so we get asked a lot, what is a championship team? And so we talk a lot about, like, a championship team does not win every single match, or they don't win every point is maybe the right way to think about it. And Federer is a great example of this. Like, clearly a champion. I think he's won 80% of his matches. Like, what percent of his points do you think he's won in his career? I think on singles, it's 54%. So, like, one of the best champions of all time barely beats 50% of the points. Like, but he's still a champion. It's like, why? Like, what makes him a champion in that situation? I think there's two really big pieces here. Like, one, he shakes off the misses. He's going to have bad shots. He's going to have great shots. They're each one shot. And he moves on to win the next point. I think the second is for the points that matter the most. And there are some points that end up mattering the most. He gets laser focused on the next play and wins those points. I think it's no different for us at Plaid or for any of the listeners out here. Like, as leaders, we have to get up after big wins and big losses and say, it's time to get set for the next play. Coach K is famous for this. Like, a common phrase he always throws out is next play. I love it. I think it's the only thing you truly control in life and in business is, like, the next play that you can go and focus on. And so for me, it's a lot about making sure the team realizes you're not going to win every single point, but we are going to gear up for the next point 100% of the time.
You had to bring the Duke back into it. My goodness. Just kidding, man. What I'm going to do is take into what we call our long ass lightning round. So I ask every successful person that comes on the pod, give me one thing you've messed up on the job before.
I should have gotten a breakup fee in the visa deal. That would have been nice. Yeah.
Dude, that's the best one we've ever gotten.
it would have killed the deal, but it would have been nice. I would have liked that.
Didn't you say though? I this may be completely apocryphal. There was a not a COVID clause, but like what was it?
Again, it's like so we were negotiating the deal. We're getting towards the end of the negotiation, the last week or two, kind of going through the final terms. And so I just pull up and we have a conversation. It's like, what are all the other things that can go wrong over the next year as we're trying to, work through the final close and all the details? And, acts of God, all these different pieces. And eventually someone, I think on our council, was like, I don't know, that could be a global pandemic. And this is December of 2019.
Wow.
And so we're like, yeah, we should probably put that in there, right? So we added a pandemic clause in December of 2019, which either, meant we had incredible foresight, or we cursed ourselves in the long run. I can't really tell which is which, but yeah, there was a pandemic clause built into our documents.
That's incredible. If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell them?
Optimize for working with people that you love. I think most people out there are good people and they get along great with folks. That's different than loving the people that you work with. Like, my litmus for loving the people you work with is you had the worst day you could possibly imagine at work, and somehow you're going to bed with more energy than you came in with. Like, I've had days like that, and that's almost the strongest signal you can get that you are working with people that you love. I think it's the ultimate luxury in life. Like, you can be successful, you can have financial success. Getting to work with the people that you love, I think is the ultimate luxury.
That's a good one. We'll end it on some Jedi mind tricks here. Can you think of one tool or tactic that's been helpful in negotiating?
I think we might have covered a couple early. It's probably those few pieces, which is like, ask more questions than you think you need. Repeat back what you think that you heard. Get curious when you're not 100% sure that you heard it correctly, and being willing to ask the follow-up questions. And then be really clear and honest about what it is that you need and that you want for the transaction or the deal to make sense. Like, it's less Jedi mind tricks. It's much more Marco Polo.
Yeah. There was this one Katie Couric quote I remember, and it was more about interviewing, but I think it's also for negotiation. It's sometimes you have to let the silence do the talking.
I like that.
Jason, this has been an absolute blast. Thanks for carving out time for me, and congrats on all the success.
Thanks so much, DJ. Congrats to you too.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.